Matthew McCabe. Welcome to Miracle Voices. Each episode, we will be delving into stories of forgiveness, healing, and transformation that have come about from integrating the principles of the book A Course in Miracles. If you want to learn more about A Course in Miracles, visit www.acim.org. If you'd like to visit the Miracle Voices site, please go to www.miraclevoices.org. If you feel inspired to make a love offering, please visit us at miraclevoices.org/donate. All donations go to support the work of the Foundation for Inner Peace, the publisher of A Course in Miracles. Now here's your program. Hello, this is Matthew McCabe. Welcome to another edition of Miracle Voices. I'm here with my co-host, Tam Morgan. Tam, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well and really glad to be here.
Good. Back from the dusty desert, and we're glad you made it out alive.
I would say I'm out of the fire into the frying pan.
Ooh, well, let's hear more about that.
Well, it's very hot here.
Okay.
But it was much hotter there. So instead of out of the frying pan into the fire, I'm out of the fire and just nice in the frying pan.
And welcome to our guest, Alan Frishman. Alan, welcome to Miracle Voices.
Well, thank you. Very nice to be here. And even though it's hot, this podcast is a cool breeze as far as I'm concerned.
Oh, thank you, Alan. We're so glad to be with you.
Me too.
Alan, where are you in the world? Where are you sitting right now? Give us a sense of geography.
So I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area in a little town called Point Richmond, which overlooks the bay and overlooks San Francisco skyline and is just on the other side of Marin County. And I've been here for about 15 years, and it's really lovely.
Oh, great.
It's a really sweet little town.
Thank you, Pam.
Yeah.
Well, Alan, I think a good place to start would be just to tell us how A Course in Miracles came into your life.
Oh, gee, it feels as if it's always been there. Kind of early on, I, like many people who've come to A Course in Miracles, I was a seeker, and I tried this and I tried that, and I read a lot of books and I went to a lot of trainings. And then in the early 70s, I was particularly interested in something called the Seth material. So I followed that very carefully. In fact, at the time, I was an English teacher at a public school in Connecticut, and one of my colleagues, who was a sailplane pilot, in the summer would go to Elmira, New York. And there he met Richard Bach, the guy who wrote Jonathan Livingston Seagull and a few other spiritually centered books. And both of them, being in Elmira, New York, visited Jane Roberts, who was a channeler for Seth. So I was particularly interested in the Seth material to the extent that I used to go to Thursday night meetings of people who would talk about it. In one of those meetings in early 1976, the woman who held the meetings gave me a copy of a manual for teachers, which had just come out, thinking I would like it. Of course I did. I got that. And ever since then, I've been very, very focused on the course and seeing it as the pathway that was most appealing to me.
Wow, that's quite a journey. How would you say your life has changed from working with the Course?
I'm in more peace with myself. We can talk about this a little bit later, but I used to feel very competitive in comparing myself to others, but in a way that I didn't let on that was happening. So basically, I would get my cues from what I thought other people thought of me, which is really a very kind of disorienting way to be. And I think one of the main advantages or main gifts that the Course has given to me is not worrying about how I show up to what seem to be other people and just being comfortable with myself. And basically just being willing to let my higher self, the Holy Spirit, give me guidance. I will step back and let him lead the way. It's very, very comforting. It's giving me peace. And I'd say particularly for the last 10 or 15 years, it's made life a lot more peaceful and comfortable for me.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, I understand you have a specific forgiveness story that you can share. Would you like to go ahead?
Yeah, the forgiveness story may be a little different from others that you've had on your broadcast because it centers on essentially forgiving myself. as I said before, I used to feel as if there were things that I had to do in order to achieve a peace of mind or in order to be saved. So basically, my default position was one of judgment and one of fear. And of course, this showed up in that I would see other people, projections of my own stuff. I would not see them for who they really were, but see them for the kind of stories that I had told about myself and had attached to them. So I went around year after year through my entire life, just in a state of judgment, and which is really the opposite of, of forgiveness. Um, and at the same time, I felt a kind of I felt God's presence even from a very early age. But for me, it was a question of how to manage that presence. So one of the things I did was I just prayed constantly. And not that I wanted to, but I felt as if I had to do it, almost like an expiation or some kind of ritualistic protection. So the forgiveness process for me was getting to the point where I realized that through willingness to, through my ability to be willing to give this over, I could forgive myself. And in the process, as I said before, not worry about what others thought of me and not get my cues from what I thought other people were thinking about me. And in the process, I recognized that my kind of ritualistic prayers, again, there was nothing that I had to do in order to be, in order to connect with God, in order to connect with my divine self. So that realization became my default position. And it was simply a question not of doing something, but of kind of undoing all the impediments that have stood in the way of really realizing who I was. So the forgiveness process for me was really ultimately forgiving myself. And that showed up in the fact that I took myself largely out of judgment of others and kind of a quantification process of putting things in a kind of hierarchy of importance and making decisions on the basis of what I thought that hierarchy presented to me. So, yeah, that's kind of how I understood it.
Was it like external validation you were kind of looking from others?
Oh yeah, yeah. It was totally that, totally external validation, which, from what I could see, is the main purpose of our culture, at least of our consumer culture, in order to in order to buy something, whether the buying is a product or whether the buying is a concept or a way of life, we first have to feel as if there's something wrong with us and that the validation would come from something outside of us. And so I began to see that as I'm looking around in the culture and society and in the whole way our and the whole way our community is set up was like based on people thinking that there was a hole inside of them, people being afraid and finding ways to kind of expiate that, which took the form either of material goods or more likely what other people thought of them. So I bought into that a lot. And so not having to buy into that is a great relief.
Yeah.
I see that as one particular perspective. There are other perspectives around it that could also be true. I mean, in your case, that was absolutely true. But it's funny because when you use the example of buying something, of course, we're fed all sorts of consumer reasons to buy things and, fashion models and all of that. But there is another aspect that I just say that I live, and we could, deconstruct it, and it might end up in the same perspective as yours. But I find when I buy something, certainly clothes, it isn't about what others are going to think how I look in it. at all. It's something that gives me joy. Like my spirit has joy wearing something, whether it's flowing or whether it's a certain color for a moment. And there was a book written, I can't believe I'm so bad with names, but it was about how to go through your closet and let go of your clothes. And it became very popular. But the biggest message is only hold what brings you joy and everything else get rid of. And I went into this overstuffed closet and I went in through thing by thing by thing. And I had stuff from when I was 13 years old that I still fit into that I held because it each brought me joy. And I thought, I have to find another way to go through my closet. And it was really funny because the only way I could get rid of stuff is if I was angry. And I had to like anger to get rid of like, okay, enough joy with you, like to really sweep it out, because I have an experience with fabric, with textiles, with colors that is joyous. And it doesn't feel like it's not like I've never bought anything thinking, oh, well, my boyfriend would love this for me. And my brother trained me as a child of, what looks cool and what doesn't look cool. But I think I've lifted enough of all of other people's decisions on me to be able to buy something with an expression of myself. Of course, in the world of form, yes. But so I just wanted to offer that your perspective, I completely get and think it's quite valid, but there are also other ways of coming to it too, where it's not just blanket necessarily one way, and that way.
Yeah, Tam, thanks so much for sharing that. I agree. The clothes are a form and kind of a representation of things that we quote put on ourselves, whether it's an idea or a self-concept or a way we show up in the world. So we clothe ourselves in things more than just the material fabric stuff. And I see it like a metaphor for our minds, which are split, because there's that part of our mind which is joyous and loving and divine, and then that part, of course, which is loud and is formed by the ego. So going through the closet and getting rid of the stuff which is hard to get rid of sometimes because we're attached to it would be the same thing as kind of getting rid of all of those kind of ego ideas that we just have worn literally for so long and then we become attached to.
Absolutely.
And it's really hard to get rid of them because we have a story about why we should keep them. So it's a perfect metaphor, I think. And thanks for sharing that.
Yeah. No,
the life-changing magic of tidying up. Is that what it is, by Marie Kondo?
By Marie Kondo, yeah.
Yes. Absolutely. That was it. And that book became so popular around where we live, Alan, that you wouldn't give stuff away to Goodwill anymore. They were rejecting. There was like that book.
Yep.
Everyone giving stuff, and we're filled up, and you're going to have to give it elsewhere.
Yeah, we have to clean out the closet of our minds, I guess, is what it is.
We do. And where does that clutter go?
Well, one man's meat is another man's poison. And I mean, I have for at least the last 20 years gotten only clothes from thrift shops and secondhand shops. Part of it is ecological, and but it gives me an opportunity to select something that I really love without having to pay the original price of it. So the idea was that whoever had that originally, it didn't work for that person for whatever reason, but it works for me. So the stuff that I get rid of, I kind of bless and hope that someone, because I do get rid of a lot of stuff, that whoever winds up with that will get the joy that I thought I had with it originally. Yeah,
no, I agree. I'm a big thrift store person, and I don't even think that it didn't work for them. I think it worked for them for a time. They loved it for a moment, and now it's time to share it with someone else. But I think I was referring to when we clear out our mind, all the stuff that we're clearing. Where does that go to next? And with the course, we do know where that goes to next, and it, where that can be dissolved into something that is not toxic and transformative. Instead, it's almost in the world of form, alchemical.
Yeah, I like the imagery the course uses about it's just becoming like a little wisp that just kind of tumbles around and slowly disappears like a puff of smoke because it was never real in the first place. So it goes away, unlike the shirt that I gave to somebody.
Which eventually can go away too.
Yeah, hopefully in a way that's not toxic to the environment.
Right.
Hopefully.
Right.
Jerry Seinfeld has a joke about men and their underwear. It says men wear their underwear until they float off their body like dandelion spores.
Oh my, again, this is, life is filled with all of this like synchronicities. We were talked about the prayer that we did before we started this session, that I did before I zoomed onto you. And before I did the prayer, I actually went through my underwear drawer, as it turns out. So I don't know how you picked that up. And I don't know if this is an appropriate topic to talk about in a miracles podcast, but sure, underwear is as valuable as anything else. And I did go through it and sorted it out.
Yeah.
Good. I mean, it can have a metaphor too. It's underwear.
Yeah.
It's
protective clothing.
Yeah. Right.
Well, Alan, you also have a story with about that happened with Ken Wapnick, Gloria Wapnick. Do you want to share that?
Yeah. So this is in Connecticut, and there's a meeting place called the Mercy Center in Madison, Connecticut, a small town on the Long Island shoreline. And there was a meeting of A Course in Miracles where Ken and Gloria Wapnick were the talkers there. And one thing that I didn't share with you earlier, Matt, was that I did talk with Ken because I had been an English teacher for a long time about the connections I saw in Hamlet and in the whole Course in Miracles thing about the false father and the real father. And Hamlet, name Madam, not seems, a whole distinction between what's real and between illusions. And I just saw a lot of connections there. We had that conversation. The thing that was really important to me was at one point, Ken invited me to come and speak to the group. And one of the things that would happen to me in such a situation is that I would get performance anxiety because, again, going back to what I was saying earlier, I was worried about how I would show up to other people. As I was walking to the front of this large room filled with people to talk about aspects of A Course in Miracles, it came over me that my role was, as the prayer says, just to share, just to be a conduit for spirit. And this wasn't about me. This wasn't about how effective I was, how fluid my conversation was, what I looked like. I was just there to serve in this particular role, to serve the people that I was addressing. So that shift from it's about me to it's about them. And of course, ultimately realizing that them is really aspects of me anyway, and we're all the same, was really refreshing. And it's like taking a weight off your shoulder, like the Course says, when you finally give up judgment. I guess this is part of a forgiveness process as well, is getting out of the judgment of how I'm showing up and realizing that in whatever public role that I have, or even in any kind of private relationship that I have, it's not about focusing on my own, what I think is my identity and what I look like, but rather my role to serve and to communicate and to kind of elevate the situation by kind of letting the divine part of myself come through. And that happened within the context of this talk that Ken and Gloria were giving at the Mercy Center. This must have been like I'm going to guess, maybe 1979, something like that, maybe 1980, some time ago. So I've always been grateful for that.
That was true mercy.
Yeah, it was true mercy. It was, it was a mercy center. And, and it's funny because it was land that was donated by the Grant Company. I don't know if you two are old enough to remember Grant stores. There were like, kind of Walmart stores, but they donated this land that they had, and it was taken over by the Catholic Church. So it became a mercy center. And I had a lot of judgments about the fact that this was a specific religious organization the person who had donated the land was an entrepreneur who made a lot of money, maybe not always ethically. Yet all of these structural elements were put aside because within the place and context of that mercy center, something good happened. So it got me again. This is part of that whole giving up the judgment and forgiveness process, to realize that something that I might have thought was done in an unclean way or an unsavory way still has availability to it to be used for its higher purposes, the same way our bodies can be, or really anything in this world that we live in can be used for that purpose. So that was another realization that I had from this talk as well.
Yeah, that's a beautiful one, because that can really remove judgment down from a place to a person, you know, and how anything can be used. Even strange, awkward personalities can be used for higher purpose.
Yeah, thank you. I don't want to mention specific political figures, but there are some out there who serve a purpose as just vast, clear indicators of kind of ego going wild. So it would be a way to use those personalities for all of us to understand the lessons that come from it. And so instead of simply, I've been trying not simply to decry those political and other figures who I think are doing things that are unethical, but to see it as an opportunity that can shift my perspective and therefore kind of understand what's going on with them. As the Course says, just send them love, which is what they're looking for. So I guess that's a forgiveness process on a larger arena and on the whole national scope, not just a personal scope. And I think that ultimately will lead us into a place of more reconciliation as far as our culture and our society goes as well.
And again, in the my mother, one of her favorite sayings was, "Don't mix levels." But in, like, the farther one goes out in perspective, like, that's a beautiful perspective, and it brings you into your own personal coursework of seeing how to forgive that. But then there's the next another level. I don't know what's the next or not, but another level of seeing that maybe what they're doing is just perfect for the larger picture, and that they're fulfilling a function that is necessary for an evolution that we do not know about. And it's hard to imagine that certain acts are imperfection of a whole bigger picture, like children dying and all sorts of stuff that are just horrific here. But in the larger picture, a greater purpose is being served in so many ways that we aren't aware of. And that trust in that deeper intelligence that we are one, and that all of these effective personalities and styles and choices that seem absolutely wrong from our perspective are indeed part of a whole that's moving, hopefully, closer to oneness.
Tam, that's a really, really useful and good way of putting it. After a hiatus of about 30 years, I've decided to offer a class on A Course in Miracles in the community education piece at the College of Marin in Kentfield, California. And so right now I have 17 students, and what you were talking about is one of the big questions that these students have, most of whom are new to the Course, which is, how do you account for the things that seem to be negative in the world?
Yeah.
And so your perspective was like really good. Our judgment that they are negative, we don't really have the bigger picture. We're just seeing it from our own private perspective,
Right.
which is tainted. There's a larger purpose if we allow that larger purpose to come through.
Yeah. I mean, one of the most powerful lessons is, I don't know what anything is for.
Yeah.
And you doing that one continuously, really not knowing what anything is for, but trusting that it is for something greater. Maybe not the second in our awareness, but that's a hard one. because a lot of exceptions come into that one when you start doing that practice for real.
This is really big, not knowing what anything is for. This is also part of the forgiveness process, Matt, you were asking about earlier. One of my strengths was academic excellence. So it was important for me as I was growing up, and until maybe 10 or 15 years ago, always to be the smartest one in the room, which is really a very uncomfortable place to be. So I always had to show that I knew what things were for. It was, I had to be clever. I had to be witty. I had to know what everything was for. So realizing, as you say, Tam, that I don't know what this is for was so relieving. It kind of relieved me of this burden of having to know. I did not have to be the smartest one in the room. I could just be another chicken in the coop. That was fine with me.
That's huge.
That was really huge in my life, and hopefully for others that kind of go through that process as well.
Yeah. I grew up with a brother who was an off the charts genius.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother, who never felt she was very intelligent, was an incredible intellect. And, she was just very self-facing in that way. And even down to a story where I was the stupidest in the family because my mother took me for an IQ test, a traditional IQ test way back when I was 5 years old. And they asked me what the difference was between an orange and a baseball. And my answer was, well, you could eat both, but one tasted better. I got sent home with like stupid IQ. And my mother, I remember on the drive home, said, honey, why didn't you say one was orange, one was white? I said, well, that was so obvious. Didn't they know that? And so I was the stupid one in the family. And I became very comfortable being, in certain ways, the stupid. It's where he would call me stupid, and I'd say, I had more friends than he had. And position, as you said, that you needed to be the smartest, I already knew I was never going to be the smartest. And the way that I used my smarts was getting through graduating college and high school each a year early, because I knew I needed to get out of the world of academia, by taking as many independent studies as I could, where it was just me and the teacher, knowing that if I did that, the teacher was grading themselves, so they had to give me an A. Because if I wasn't getting an A from being just me and the teacher, they were doing something wrong. So I got all these A's, and I looked really smart, and I got through, college in 3 years and high school in 3 years, and took off to Nepal. And my learning was the world. The world of experience through there. But I could only imagine, I really never thought till you mentioned it today, what a burden it has been, in some cases for my brother, to feel like the smartest in the room all the time. And, I just never had that perspective.
I like the way you handle that story. This may sound like a judgment. You sound pretty smart to me.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, really. And it's not not that it matters, but but these stories we tell about ourselves, again, it's going back to that whole judgment issue, is that we get set with these stories. One of the questions that came up in the class was, are babies born innocent? And to what extent, how do we take on these stories? Why do they adhere to us like the clothes in our closet that don't fit anymore? And
yep. And narratives can be extremely powerful. And I think I said in a podcast, I'm not sure if I said it or not, but I went to a bat mitzvah of a very forward-thinking young soon-to-be woman, and her whole talk was on the saying, sticks and stones can break my bones, but words can never hurt me. And her thesis in her bat mitzvah, so to speak, was that words hurt so much more than sticks and stones, because they're stories that you hold and you can't get rid of, and you can heal from the sticks and stones.
Right. Yeah.
But intelligence in that way is a story unto ourselves. And I grew up with a lot of condescension and in a Jewish environment of if you're not smart. And my brother did a tremendous kindness, and he wrote one of the first papers ever on emotional intelligence and talked about how he and I were basically, two sides of a coin, and mine was emotional intelligence. He couldn't get a joke to save his life, but he had this incredible intellectual intelligence, and there's so many different kinds. So the stories we tell ourselves to make ourselves either feel extremely superior or really awful are just stories, letting go of all that judgment of that we're not this and we're not that. But the more I do the course practice, the more I know we're all one. So I am as smart as my brother, and he is as intuitive as am I, and it's all just part of the same package.
Absolutely. I mean, I like the fact that your rejoinder to him was that you had more friends than he did. So that's a form. Yeah, for me, I must say, when I first read the course, one of the hardest parts for me to accept was that I'm not special. Gee whiz, I wanted so badly to be special. Can't God? Oh, sure, of course, God made me special. That was tough. That was a tough one for me to kind of give up the seduction, the temptation of specialness.
Yeah, and so it is.
Yeah,
and yet the irony is, as you get closer and as one gets closer and closer to that state, you realize how incredibly special you are. That it's appearing as you right now. And on a certain level. So it's the specialness is nothing. And then it's the most special feeling there is.
Right. Again, the Holy Spirit using with the ego's processes for good.
Yes.
Taking the specialness into our special function. What is it we're here for? How can we best serve?
Exactly.
You could say that's a form of specialness, but it's not a hierarchical specialness. It's a kind of service specialness, I guess.
Yeah. And it's a specialness that we're here to get to do this special function.
Yes, you're right. I mean, we are here.
Yeah.
We are here.
Yep, we are here. Or we're not. I mean, again, levels.
or well, yeah, well. Well, I'm looking at pictures of you. I think I'm talking to you, but I mean, who knows? I don't know what this is for. I'll just go back to that.
I forgive you for that, Alan.
Well, thank you.
Because none of this happened, and it's not happening, but here we are. All right.
I had this awareness years ago where I wanted to know about certainty because I had been plagued with doubt, and the Course talks about God as certain. And I just wanted to know what certainty was. So I came upon the understanding that I can only be certain of something if it had already happened, because I knew it happened. So therefore, I was certain that it will happen because it already happened. And from that, the next step was to talk about that this is already over, as the Course talks about a bit, that we're already in heaven, we're already saved. We're just kind of reviewing something that already happened, and we're just going through it again, and realizing that we already finished our work, even while we think we're still in the process of doing the work, gave me a feeling of certainty. So I've been going with that for a while. If that makes any sense.
It makes a lot of sense. I mean, for me, it's that certainty is peace, and I can only relate it for myself to having been a child psychic. And, I had all of these dreams that came true, or knowledge that something was about to happen. And it was crazy making to me, because until it happened, no one will believe me. So then I was suddenly involved in these experiments that I, as a child, couldn't quite get why people were experimenting and proving for science that something happened that already happened. So they were proving that it was true that I knew what was inside an envelope. And it was like, but it is true. It happened. I knew what was in the envelope. What is it that you're trying to validate? And it took me a very, it gave me a contraction from scientists. Like, this is silly. Why are you proving something happened that already happened? And it took me a long time to understand why and how and its importance in science to do it that way. But there is a thread here that's similar to what you're saying.
I am always happy. I like to read things about quantum physics and that kind of thing. And I'm always happy to hear that scientists have shown the things that I already knew all along.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But that's still part of external validation.
Yeah, it's still there. You're right.
I'm trying in my life to, when I see something and know something, not care anymore whether it gets validated on the outside or not, to make it real. And to just know it is real because I've already seen it. It's a really difficult path.
Yeah.
Because we always, often, or certainly my personality, waits for the validation of, oh, okay, now it's happened in this time. So see, it was real. Rather than knowing it beforehand, it's already real. It's already done. Move on. Next.
So Tam, are you still able to understand things that could not be explicable scientifically?
I don't know the answer to that because I'm not well read enough about that. I mean, my mother, when she was 89 years old and broke her ankle, came out of her bedroom after she hardly ever slept towards the end anyway, and said, there's something I want to master before I die. And I'm thinking, what, knitting? Like, what do you want to? And I said, what is it, Mom? And she said, quantum physics.
Okay.
And I said, really? She got every book, every podcast, everything she could gather on quantum physics. And as she was deep in, and she would have a Sunday afternoon talk with a friend who was very into it. And I said, so what are you getting? And she said, finally, science is converging with my belief system that could never be proved when I was much younger. And the language is coming together now in a way that expresses what I always felt I knew. And it's very rewarding to see.
Well, your mother was like very perceptive and very wise. And I guess I really don't need the validation, but it still gives me comfort. It's kind of like listening to a good joke or something. It just kind of makes me feel good. And I'm glad that she had that experience because it kind of, in a way, it kind of makes it realer somehow. Even though we don't need the validation, it's still kind of nice to know it. So,
it does
yeah.
It brings peace.
Yeah, it sounded as if it gave her comfort, which is great.
Yeah, but my answer to you is, I don't know, and I have to say that at this time in my life, I don't care. I don't have the same care or need that, oh, look, it's validated. It doesn't matter. It is deeply my guiding principles and true for me. It's my sense of truth, and I'm finally at the place where pretty much no one can distract me from it and say, oh, you haven't proven it, or that's not okay. That's okay. It's okay that you don't believe it. I know it to be true because it's been 100%, not 99, 100% in my life.
Yeah, that's that certainty that we were talking about before. And the Course talks about how God is certain, and that is the way for things to show up is through certainty. And again, I was always curious about the difference between doubt and between debt and credit, if you just use the metaphor of money, because credit means I believe, or it comes from credo, and debt comes from doubt. So it takes its form even in the monetary system of whether you believe something or whether you doubt something. It kind of shows up like that. This is not maybe a spiritual thing, but again, it's kind of a manifestation that we live with in our society. I just thought looking at words are very interesting. Like you, Tam, live on Mount Tam. So I don't know if that's intentional or not, but that's, I think, very interesting.
Like Zeus.
It's like Zeus. That's very funny, Matt. I can't tell you specifically that it's intentional. I was really glad to finally have a frame of reference for my name. I've gone by Tamara a lot, but but Tam is the people closest to me. My brother always called me Tam. And when I came out here, just say my name is Tam, like the mountain. It's easy for me. And I actually moved up the mountain, not because it was my name, but because I loved Mill Valley, and Mill Valley got overrun by I called it the dot commies, where all the houses suddenly became millions of dollars practically overnight. And I moved up the mountain because there were still more of the old world characters up here who I love. But it happened to be Mount Tam. But Freud's grandson, who happens to be a friend of my brother's, told me that there is a name for that, where people move or happen to live in a place that reflects their own name. And there really is a syndrome, if that's what it's called, that there is a psychological term for that. And I don't remember what it is.
Interesting. I guess I should move to Allentown, Pennsylvania, I suppose.
Have fun.
There's the same phenomenon with people and their pets, whether their hairdo reflects is the same as their dog's hairdo. Have you noticed that?
Yep, absolutely.
Well, we are all one, so there are these kind of indications, these little jokes that show up every so often. I mean, this is a divine comedy. I remember how the Course says this whole thing happened because we forgot to laugh. We just forgot to laugh. So therefore, we just forgot to laugh.
Yep.
So therefore, so we're going back to Seinfeld, like you were saying before. So maybe if we just laugh a bit, we will wake up laughing. You probably heard that. We will wake up laughing.
Yeah. And I know I've said this many times before on podcasts, on webinars, but I'll see if you know it or if you heard it. Do you know what the common denominator is to laughter throughout the world?
Tell me. I don't. Tell me. I don't know anything.
Yeah, I love that. Well, supposedly, it is the breath that's taken after the laughter.
Interesting. Wow. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So
wow.
There's extreme laughter, light laughter, and then there's that, and that's common for everyone.
Wow. That's really something good to understand.
Yeah.
To get. That's great. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah.
Of course.
Well, Alan, we'd like to ask our guests if you have any specific things you do when you get kind of caught in an ego storm and you lose your center and your focus and forgiveness. Is there any practical tips that you could give that how you get back on track?
The best thing, if it's possible for me to just take some time and get quiet and still, if that works within the place that I'm at, that's something that I could do. Recognizing that sometimes physical manifestations have value, like Tam was talking about clothes. I have a little string bracelet that I wear on my right wrists, and I consider that a way to remember God. So it's just kind of like where you would put a string around your finger or something like that. This is just something that I do. If in fact I find myself getting sucked into the downward spiral of the ego, I just look at this very thin little rope I have on my right wrist and I shouldn't have to do that, but that's something that I use to get me to remind me that there's something that's real that I'm not really understanding and return to a more peaceful state. So I hope that might be helpful to someone else to have some kind of physical object maybe that has meaning for them that they could relate to.
Yeah, it is nice to have kind of a physical touchstone sometimes.
It is. I have a ring that I wear on my pointer finger on my right hand. That's like it in Hindu. It's called a japa ring. But it doesn't look like one. And I got it in my early 20s, and it was around my birthday, and everyone adopted a little diamond on it. That's what they gave me, and it's this ring with multicolor stones with little diamonds in between that I just twirl around all day.
Oh, that is lovely. That's lovely. We put our intention behind something, and that object absorbs the intention.
Yeah, it's like a prayer wheel on my finger.
Perfect. I like that, and I like the fact that people have contributed to it as well. So that's really nice. Yeah.
Me too. It's full of love, tremendous, and laughter. Like adopt a diamond. It was very, very silly and fun.
Alan, we have a tradition of asking guests if there is a specific comfort food that's your go-to. What's
Oh
your
boy.
comfort? What's your
Oh
comfort food?
gee. Comfort food. Well, I like mashed potatoes.
Me
Oh,
too.
Um,
With butter?
and gravy?
Gravy. Yeah. So I'm a vegetarian, so it has to be vegetarian kind of gravy.
Hmm.
Basically, I just like food, so
Yeah.
that really any kind of stewy kind of thing.
Mm.
Um, so going back to what Tam was saying about just having the joy of your clothes, I can understand that it could be a temptation when you're feeling off a bit just to eat a lot. So I make sure if I'm using food as comforting to eat it very deliberately and very consciously, and maybe not in taking small bites, so that I'm aware of the quality of the food and not worrying about um, the quantity of the food.
Hmm.
So yeah, so I always find that very nice. I also like to just to relax. Um, I like I like automotive design, so I kind of like to read things about people who design cars, and that's just a kind of pleasant little vacation that I could take from what seem to be the woes of the world.
I love reading instruction manuals. I really do. I love them.
Well, yeah, I think your brother would be proud.
No, he never had to read them. He just knew how something worked.
Wow,
No, not necessarily. But I will say, Alan, if you asked me to guess what kind of comfort food that you would have, it would totally be stews. It's like stewing in your own juices and going through it and, really taking it in consciously is everything that you
Okay.
said to us today. So I love that was
marinating. He likes to marinate in his own thoughts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What I'll do is this is because everything is one. I'll just go into the refrigerator and take whatever's left over and just mix it all together.
Yeah.
And kind of eat it deliberately, but kind of eat it as one thing. And then I feel good about that. So that gives me comfort, Matt.
Oh, that's good. That's
good.
Thank
you for that.
Yes.
Thoughtful answer.
Well, Alan, thanks so much for coming on Miracle Voices and sharing your miracle voice. Is there any website or social media or anything you want to point listeners to or about your class?
Not specifically. This is something that I've just started again. So it's a class at the College of Marin in the Community Education Center, and it's every Tuesday night for an hour and a half, starting at 6:10. And the class will be running through October 4th for this semester, but there is a sign up for the next semester, which is the fall winter semester. So if anybody listening to this podcast wants to continue a conversation about a course or just wants to meet with other people who are interested, that's something that they may want to consider.
Alan, stay cool in these hot temperatures and hope you have a great rest of the year. Thanks for coming on.
And I will do my best to stay cool. I've enjoyed this conversation very much. And thanks again for inviting me. Okay.
Thanks so much for listening today. Please subscribe to Miracle Voices by hitting the subscribe button on your podcast app. If you are enjoying these conversations, please consider leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever podcast app you use. And lastly, please visit us at miraclevoices.org and join our newsletter so we can stay connected. Until the next podcast, I want to leave you with my favorite course quote: "When you want only love, you will see nothing else."